Hi, this is Dr. Clarence R. Pearson, Sr., and welcome to My View, a podcast where I offer my professional perspective on today's most pressing geopolitical and socioeconomic issues. Recently, my attention has been drawn to developments in the United States, where a recent Supreme Court's ruling is generating a stir among civil rights advocates. Here is my view on the matter: the foundation and fragility of the American vote, minority representation in a new legal era. The right to vote is often described as the right that protects all other rights. In the United States, that principle has depended heavily on the Voting Rights Act of 1965, especially Section 2, which prohibits voting practices that deny or dilute minority citizens' political power. For decades, Section 2 gave minority communities a legal tool to challenge maps and election rules that weakened their ability to elect candidates of choice. That tool still exists, but recent Supreme Court rulings have narrowed its reach. The turning point began with Shelby County versus Holder in 2013, when the court effectively ended the old preclearance system that required certain jurisdictions with histories of discrimination to obtain federal approval before changing voting rules. In 2021, Brnovich versus Democratic National Committee upheld Arizona voting restrictions and introduced guideposts that made Section 2 vote denial claims harder to prove. In 2026, Louisiana versus Calais went further by striking down Louisiana's congressional map with two majority black districts, ruling that the state's race conscious mapmaking crossed constitutional lines. The court's majority framed the issue as one of constitutional equality. States may not rely too heavily on race when drawing districts. Supporters of the ruling argue that the Constitution forbids racial sorting, even when the intention is remedial. Civil rights advocates see the decision differently. They argue that the ruling weakens the very mechanism Congress designed to prevent minority vote dilution, especially in states where race and party affiliation often overlap. The practical difficulty is this: modern discrimination rarely announces itself in open language. A state can defend a map by saying it was drawn for partisan advantage, not racial exclusion. Because the court has also held that federal courts generally cannot police partisan gerrymandering, critics warn that partisan explanations can become a shield for racial effects. This creates a legal maze for minority voters who must now disentangle race, party, geography, turnout, history, and intent in order to prove that their voting power has been unlawfully diluted. The consequences may be severe. Majority minority districts have long been one of the principal means by which Black, Latino, Native, and other minority communities gained meaningful representation in Congress and state legislatures. If courts treat many such districts as unconstitutional racial gerrymanders, states may gain greater freedom to split minority communities across several districts, leaving them politically visible but electorally weakened. With federal protection narrowed, voting rights advocacy is shifting towards state constitutions, state voting rights acts, voter registration drives, litigation in state courts, and renewed pressure for federal legislation such as the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. States including Washington, New York, and Maryland have moved towards stronger state-level voting protections, but those efforts remain vulnerable if federal courts conclude that state remedies rely too heavily on race. This is the central tension of the new voting rights era. The court's majority emphasizes a constitutional ideal of colorblind election law. Civil rights advocates emphasize the lived reality that race still shapes residential patterns, political access, turnout, and representation. Between those positions lies the future of American democracy. The path forward will not rest in courts alone. It will require state lawmakers willing to protect fair representation, Congress willing to clarify the Voting Rights Act, journalists willing to explain complex redistricting battles, and citizens willing to organize before maps are finalized rather than after representation is lost. The legal safety net has been weakened. That makes public vigilance more important, not less. The vote remains the foundation of democratic citizenship. But foundations can crack quietly before they collapse visibly. The challenge now is whether America can protect minority representation without denying constitutional limits, and whether it can honor constitutional equality without ignoring the continuing consequences of racial exclusion. My View is a continuing series where I share informed commentary on a wide range of geopolitical and socioeconomic topics. If you found today's discussion helpful, please follow, subscribe, like, and share. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I invite you to explore other My View episodes available online. Until we meet again, goodbye.